I have a problem with the D&D alignment system, and I'm not the only one, but I'm against it for a different reason. Much to a lot of white nerds' irritation, D&D is trying to make their content less racist. And honestly, it's a step in the right direction, so why are a legion of angry white nerds against this idea? Well, statistically, white people are uncomfortable with talking about racism. Most white people are inherently racist because of their upbringing and refuse to improve themselves because the term racist defines the older generations, and I can't be bundled with them. You have racist tendencies because it benefits those in power to have white people believe they're the dominant race. If you disagree with me, but you enjoy Critical Role, you're not paying attention.
For the Wildemount setting, I definitely wanted to pursue different themes. I wanted to find ways to tackle the intrinsic coding of monsters, races being evil, and tackle ideas of relative morality and conflict and warfare and the good and bad things that come out of that on a historic level.
What makes D&D racist? Honestly, the answer could be its whole 1-hour video, so I'll simplify it down. It's the alignment system. They've listed entire races as evil. Anyone who has a problem with this is lazy for not coming up with reasons as to why your party is getting attacked other than orc bad. Maybe your party desecrated sacred land and enraged an entire group of dwarves. Regardless of racism, you're telling me you're fitting the entirety of a collection of species into a 3x3 square where 3 of them are considered evil? Genius. Like, the Myers-Briggs test has been fairly disproven at this point. Even that has more options for the single human race. So, I have 2 options. First, quick and easy. Then second, down and dirty. First, quick and easy. If you don't want to put in a lot of work and just want to tweak your game, here's what you do. Good and evil? Yeah, that now exists for individuals as a scale. I don't mean get on this scale after Thanksgiving, gained 5 pounds this holiday scale. I mean a measure from one point to the other. On one side, good, the middle neutral, and the other side evil, like we're used to using. However, it's a scale of good and evil. There's no boxes, so the marker can move freely depending on the choices that we make. And it all blends into each other. You decide how far the pointer moves. But Peachy, I hear you ask, because I'm all-knowing. What about the rest of the chart? If good and evil becomes a personality trait, what about the rest? Well, we're going to replace good and evil. Lawful and chaotic aren't great either, but this is the quick and easy way, not the perfect way. Replace good and evil with selfless and selfish. Again, not perfect, but easy. Now, being selfish isn't necessarily bad. Selfish could mean survival in the face of adversity, standing up to those who wish to hurt you or your family. And selfless isn't necessarily good either. You can be taken advantage of, walked over, etc. More specifically, lawful selfless refers to societies who help those in trouble, those in need, because the law requires it. They do so without thinking. Chaotic selfless might steal from the rich and give to the poor. Lawful selfish might use the law to hoard their wealth, similar to what we see in the United States. Wall Street, ring a bell? Now, on the other hand, chaotic selfish might just be a lawless society, a group of brigands, highwaymen, looking to rob their next target. And these are just examples. You can spin it any way you want. Maybe a race is lawful selfish against a specific race who declared war on them. It's not evil. It just makes sense in the context of their society. Now, on to down and dirty. Every DM takes bits and pieces from their work or education to apply to D&D, and I'm no exception. I'm getting my degree in human communication, so let's steal from that. We have several emphases in the field. Right now I'll list 3, but there's definitely more. First, the most known, interpersonal communication. Studying interactions between individuals and the self. Second, critical cultural communication. Questioning power dynamics in society, which is basically the emphasis that led to people figuring out that D&D is racist to begin with. And third, what I'm going to use to replace the alignment system, intercultural communication. Communication between cultures, if that wasn't fairly obvious. So, there's a theory that seeks to categorize cultures throughout the world. Hofstede is the scholar who popularized cultural dimensions, but as time goes on, improvements need to be made, which is why I also used works from Ford, Minkov, as well as the additions of others who helped them. Theories aren't perfect. They're meant to be updated as our understanding improves, so who knows? In 10 years, maybe the model will look completely different. You can find my sources down in the description below if you're interested. I've also included a link to my Discord where you can find a printable resource that is formatted for a 3x5 card on the 6 scales we're going to discuss in just a minute. Quick reminder before I get too far. Since we are talking about race, some players don't want to deal with racist NPCs. Sure, as a white person, it is interesting to imagine how fictional races interact with power struggles, but for many people of color, like my wife, this is their everyday life, and they don't want to play a fantasy game with daily struggles. I bring this up just to reinforce the session 0. Be an adult and talk to your players about adult or sensitive themes you have planned. If they're not interested, don't force them into it. The point is to have fun. So with that in mind, let's get into it. To start, we're going to keep the individual good-evil scale from the previous example and build upon it. Instead of the alignment table, we're going to use a combination of 6 scales to define race, culture, and even individuals. Differences in environment can result in human variance, tiefling variance, half-elf variance, etc. If you don't want to use this for races in general, which you totally should, but this can help develop more 3-dimensional characters that aren't just collections of things you really should be discussing in therapy. I'll go through and define each of the scales and give examples for each side of the scale as well as the middle. The main thing here is that I'll be discussing how one side views the other and vice versa. However, this defines the collective culture. Individuals can hold different attributes based on their upbringing, education, interactions with other races and cultures, etc. Think about the United States and how different California is to Texas. Similar state size, large populations, way different cultures. And I want to stress this heavily. None of these are bad in controlled quantities. Obviously, too much of a good thing is a bad thing. So don't go thinking any of these are the bad option. Doing so would be considered ethnocentric, basically thinking your culture is the best, which it's not. No culture is the best. First, the scale of identity. On one side, individualism, meaning a focus of the individual over the community. In the real world, think of Americans. They usually only care about themselves and would start a war with another country because they need more oil, etc. On the other side, collectivism, meaning a focus on the community rather than themselves as an individual. Think of Mexico or Italy. Strong familial bonds, big emphasis on keeping the highest number of people happy as possible. These cultures in the middle may only care heavily about a specific group, such as their immediate family, but not their extended family or culture as a whole. Individuals tend to look at collectivists as being weirdly involved with family, while collectivists may look at individualists as caring too much about themselves or being self-centered. Second, the scale of power distance. Not like power level, but how someone in a low position of power might speak to someone in power. The two sides here are small power distance and large power distance. Think of small power distance as Americans calling their teacher by their first name, and think of large power distance as Japanese students treating their teachers with respect. The teacher is the figure in power here, and how the students speak to them can define it, but it doesn't have to be teachers. How do the masses speak to the leader in this community? These cultures in the middle may have a specific label they heavily respect, while talking to others casually. Low power distance cultures may look at high power distance cultures as overly formal and timid. High power distance may see lower power distance as rude or delinquent. Third, the scale of self-concept. The two sides here are flexibility and stability. Those cultures who are flexible may believe heavily in changing for the better or appreciate those who adapt and overcome. On the other hand, those cultures who are stable believe in being a consistent person over time. They view this as being reliable. Those in the middle may choose to be stable in some aspects of their lives while improving others. Flexible cultures may look at stable cultures as stuck up or stubborn, while stable cultures may look at flexible cultures as two-faced or too easily persuaded to change. Fourth, the scale of emotional expression. The two sides here are hyperbole and understatement. Hyperbole cultures tend more towards vivid, colorful language with great emotional intensity, sometimes not meant to be taken literally, while understatement cultures tend more towards downplaying the emotional intensity of important events. The cultures in the middle may lead towards emotional expression for relationships, but have more tendencies towards understatement during work or professional matters. Hyperbole cultures may look at understatement cultures as emotionally dead or lacking life, while understatement cultures may look at hyperbole cultures as needlessly emotional or liars. On the flip side, some cultures may think of hyperbole as super romantic. Like how Americans look at French culture, it's almost as a point of fetishization, which, again, double check with your players if you should include that. Fifth, the scale of context. The two ends here of the scale are high context and low context. For low context, think of Americans. They say what they mean and mean what they say. High context is focused more heavily on context. As an example, in these cultures, yes may mean yes, yes may mean no, and yes can also mean maybe. All depending on non-verbal communication, things you do outside of speech to communicate meaning. Facial expressions, tone, body language, etc. As scholars, we refer to their speech as spiral logic, and it's mainly used in an effort to preserve face or trying not to have anyone get embarrassed. Instead of outright turning down a date, they may talk about how busy they are and they don't know if they'll have the time, work is really pushing for more hours and you have to visit your parents, etc., etc. High context cultures may view low context cultures as rude or blunt, while low context cultures may have a hard time figuring out what a high context culture is trying to say. Lastly, the scale of time. The two ends of the scale are monochronic and polychronic. Monochronic means that time is rigid. Americans are like this. If you tell an American to come to a party at 5 p.m. and you show up at 5:30, you're late. For polychronic cultures, time is more fluid. Think of Mexican cultures. If you get asked to go to a Mexican party at 5 p.m. and you show up at 5:30, you're either on time or early. This is really hard for a lot of Americans to comprehend, right? Like time is time, and especially time is money. But for polychronic cultures, 5 p.m. means 5 to 6 p.m. The details are less important, and they're more worried about relationships. This is why my wife and I are constantly late for everything. Those in the middle may be rigid timekeepers for doctor's appointments or work, but show up late to parties, etc. Monochronic cultures view polychronic cultures as not caring about another's time, while polychronic cultures may view monochronic cultures as stuck up or having low patience. This is the best way, for now, that you can change the races in your game. No race in the game should be marked as fully evil. Again, think, why aren't any of the races that resonate with stereotypical white people marked as evil? Because ingrained racism. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed my ideas, tap the like, lightly caress the subscribe button, and ring that bell for notifications. I stream on Twitch Saturdays at 4:30 p.m., for now, at Peachy McPeachface, where I play Hades, Dark Souls, Genshin, and many others. I'll see you around. He's probably decaying too. Nice, okay, he's dead. I literally have 1 health. Ooh!